The band Typo Negative would mix themes of romance, drugs, depression, and death, and would be credited as bringing goth rock to the masses. Their third record, Bloody Kisses, would be their commercial breakthrough and the biggest album of their career. It also made them the biggest band on their then fledgling label, Roadrunner Records. In today's video, let's take a look at the history of the album Bloody Kisses. Typo Negative frontman and bassist Peter Steele would be the youngest of 6 children, raised in a strict Catholic household in Brooklyn, New York. He would consider himself a burden to his parents, and he would remark to the Dayton Daily News that he was taught from a young age that everything normal was evil. As he grew up, he distanced himself from religion, calling himself a born-again pagan. As for his musical influences, he would grow up idolizing the Beatles and Black Sabbath, remarking to the Associated Press, "I've always loved the Beatles, I've always loved Black Sabbath. I like the heaviness mixed with a good strong melody." As Steele got older, he would branch out to like a wider range of bands, telling the LA Times that he was a fan of droning and dreamy sounds, citing bands like the Cocteau Twins, My Bloody Valentine, and Dead Can Dance. A lot of Typo Negative's music would be written from Steele's point of view, growing up, as he didn't have a lot of luck with women. He was also emotionally fragile and vulnerable to demons, with the imposing frontman telling the LA Times in 1997, "I've gotten my heart broken so many times that I've lost count. Anytime I've been involved with someone, I've suffocated them by caring too much. That's probably why I lost them." Steele would stand close to 6 feet 8 inches tall and weighed around 250 pounds with his deep baritone voice. He would refer to himself as the ideal Frankenstein, but interviewers would describe him as soft-spoken, guarded, as well as polite. However, his opinion of himself seemed pretty low, with him consistently referring to himself in interviews as a monster, a psychopath, and a social Steele would tell the Associated Press, "Some people mistake kindness for stupidity, and now that I'm a scumbag to a lot of people, I get automatic respect. It's a very sad place that we live in, but the only way to get what you want is by instilling fear into people." It was during the late 70s, Steele played in bands including Hot Ice and Northern Lights. By 1979, he would play in a group called Fallout with future Typo Negative keyboardist Josh Silver. But the heavier sounds of punk, which were popular for a few years, were now being replaced with disco and new wave, and Fallout would soon break up, with Silver and Steele parting musically, with Silver founding the new wave group Original Sin, while Steele would found the metal group Carnivore. Carnivore would end up signing to a small label named Roadrunner Records, who put out a handful of albums from the group until they split up. Following Carnivore, Steele would initially focus on working for the municipal government in New York City, trying to become a cop, but life would have other plans. Future Typo Negative drummer Sal Abrascato, who had worked with Steele at a blacksmith shop, heard about Carnivore's breakup and went to talk to his friend about possibly working on some new music. He would tell Loudersound, "His father answered the door and let me down, and there's Peter sitting in bed watching TV, having just cut all of his hair off. He just had the New York Police Department test. He didn't want to play music anymore. I asked if he wanted to hang out and jam, have some fun. He nods, saying he's always wanted to have a band with electronica, keyboards, samples, and things like that." Steele would reconnect with longtime friend Josh Silver and add guitarist Kenny Hickey, who was also an old friend. Their new outfit would go through several monikers, including Sub-Zero and Repulsion, before landing on the name Typo Negative. The group's first demo, which was mostly leftover Carnivore tracks, would turn into the first release from Typo Negative, the sarcastic and tongue-in-cheek album Slow, Deep, and Hard, which would be released in 1991. Steele would still be under contract, though, with Roadrunner Records, and the frontman wasn't happy with the label. He took particular issue with the way they handled Carnivore's past releases, but the label loved the sound of Typo Negative's demo tape, opting to put it out. Slow, Deep, and Hard would cost the band about $6,000 to record with their own money, and it would be funded by Silver's parents, with him recalling to Revolver, "I'm not even sure I paid them back. They probably thought they were getting off cheap, though. It's like, we thought we'd have to pay for college, but you're too stupid to have done that." Led by Steele's dark and gloomy baritone, Typo Negative played shows around New York City at the legendary Lemoore nightclub and the East Village venue The Ritz. Slow, Deep and Hard would see Steele venting his frustrations after a romantic relationship of his would end. Opening their debut album would be the track Unsuccessfully Coping with the Natural Beauty of Infidelity, a track about Steele finding his woman with another man. The album's second track, Der Untermensch, would get the band labeled as bigots, and the song would ignite a huge controversy. Nowhere was a controversy bigger than in Europe. The press across the Atlantic didn't catch onto the sarcasm of the album or realize that Josh Silver was Jewish. Silver would tell Revolver, "We never planned on creating controversy to attain anything. It just kind of happened and it wasn't fun. We were grilled by the press. People who showed up to do interviews were really hostile." The band's European tour for the album was also a disaster. Guitarist Kenny Hickey would tell Revolver, "The Germans were canceling shows up and down the line. They were breaking windows on the bus. There were threats of riots and we couldn't walk the streets. The Netherlands didn't even allow the band to step foot in the country, and the group would do a total of about 3 shows in Europe, with the rest of their gigs getting cancelled," according to Hickey. So what did the band learn? Well, Hickey would tell Revolver, "You can't do sarcasm in Europe. They're translating lyrics literally. They didn't get the twist, the spoof." But that's not to say that they didn't have fans in Europe, because Europe was really where the band first got popular. Steele would tell the Indiana Gazette, "They're quite insane. I don't know where they get the money from, but they buy every single piece of merchandise." The experience would leave Steele with a distrust of the press, with him adding in the same interview, "I don't like the media because we have been bashed by the media so many times. I would really like it very much of the people who said those things if they had the guts to say it to my face. They seem to think that we take ourselves extremely seriously, which we do not. I think if you look at the lyrics, you'll see a lot of puns in there. There's a lot of sarcasm. There's some attempts at wit." But it would be 1993's Bloody Kisses which put the band on a lot of people's radars and brought their goth sound to the forefront. Also helping was the renewed interest in vampires, thanks to the 1994 film Interview with the Vampire. Even the track Suspended in Dusk is a nod to vampires. Despite pop culture helping Type O Negative, they didn't like being pigeonholed, with Steele telling the LA Times, "A goth image has been cast upon us by the media because they have to label us something. I guess people think we're vampires. I mean, we may suck, but it's not blood." Meanwhile, keyboardist Josh Silver would tell the Wichita Eagle that he referred to the band's sound as gothadelic. Bloody Kisses would produce 2 of the band's best-known songs, Black Number 1 and Christian Woman. Black Number 1 would be inspired by Steele's relationship with a goth, with him admitting to Revolver magazine that he came up with the song while he was hauling 40 cubic yards of human waste when he was working for New York City's Parks Department. The song would poke fun at the narcissistic traits of a lot of goth girls, with Abrascato telling Louder Sound. The move into Bloody Kisses made a lot of sense. At that point, Peter was showing me a lot of the bands you can hear in those later records. We'd hang out on weekends and go into the city, and Peter went in on the whole jet black hair thing. Songs like Black Number 1 were about people we'd see. This was the pinnacle of nightlife in New York. Christian Woman, meanwhile, intertwined sex and religion, being written about a religious girl Steele dated who loved to bend the rules. While Roadrunner Records tried working Black Number 1 on radio, it would be Christian Woman that really connected. It's also important to note that Bloody Kisses wasn't selling anything like 50,000 copies a week. Rather, it was a much slower burn, consistently selling 3,000 to 5,000 copies a week for several years. The album also featured a cover of the Seals and Crofts song Summer Breeze. While Steele and company wanted to change the lyrics, Seals and Croft threatened to sue the band if they didn't stick to the original lyrics. In 2016, the original demo surfaced online, including the band's original reworking of Summer Breeze, titled Summer Girl. The title track, meanwhile, would be Steele's metaphorical tribute to his deceased cat, with him recalling to Revolver, "No one wants to hear a guy who's 6'8" with long black hair and fangs crying about his cat, so I had to make it extremely metaphorical. I have a huge problem with abandonment and loss, so I took it very seriously. I love animals." There would be one song hated by everyone in the band minus Steele, and that would be the track Blood and Fire, with Abrascato telling Revolver, "I remember all 3 of us cringing when we had to play that song," adding that it sounded a little too 80s. Silver would add, "The romantic stuff never did it for me. I'd rather complain about romance than try to acquire it. Acquiring romance is something that you do at a bar when you're drunk." The album would also feature guest appearances by the members of Life of Agony, who were friends with Type O Negative. as they frequently played clubs in Brooklyn and elsewhere in New York City. Side note, guys, I've done a whole video on the career of Life of Agony. The link is down below. Despite Bloody Kisses' album cover being voted as the best artwork in Roadrunner Records history by their own staff, Silver wasn't a fan of it. He would recall, "The album cover tortures me to this day. Let's put it this way. If you want to have two gothic girls on the cover, never leave it to a guy who has blonde hair and is from Atlanta," which is what the photographer was. "Those girls are so ungothic, it's not even funny." But that kind of makes a typo, I guess. I think Peter had a darker idea in his mind. Steele was also really obsessed with the color green, being named the Green Man, a nod to his time in the Parks Department, with the color also appearing prominently in all of the band's album covers. Despite the band hitting a new level commercially, Typo Negative was careful about what came next. The Associated Press interviewed the band in 1993, and Steele talked about how he was fighting the band's newfound success, with the article stating, "Singer Peter Steele of Typo Negative thinks no one should bother listening to the band's two albums, Bloody Kisses and Slow, Deep and Hard. He doesn't want anyone showing up to their concerts either. He doesn't think he's a very good songwriter or committed performer," adding, "This is something that I do simply because it's a personal thing." He added that he wasn't a fan of touring or the rock star life, and he only really played shows to make money because to him, money meant independence. He would also remark in the same interview that his dream in 1993 was to retire at Iceland, where he wanted to live in a house fully constructed of glass and raise wolves and build crazy vehicles out of truck and tank parts. Their label and drummer Sal Abrascato, though, felt differently, thinking the band should be touring nationally to support Bloody Kisses. By late 1993, the band would do weekend jaunts, maybe driving up to Albany and then going to Boston, and then maybe doing some shows in New Jersey and Connecticut. Initially, Steele would remark that his employer, the New York City Parks Department, wasn't enthusiastic about him taking extended periods of time off from his job to tour. But they also were going through a hiring freeze, so if he quit, they wouldn't be able to replace him or rehire him. He was also making about $800 a week, and he would claim that working for the Parks Department was the best job he ever had. It was only when drummer Sal Abrascato quit the band and joined Life of Agony that the band finally committed to hitting the road, and they would end up replacing Abrascato with drummer John Kelly. Plus, the band had some offers to tour with some pretty big acts, including Danzig, Nine Inch Nails, and Motley Crue. Steele would finally quit his job, with Typo Negative spending 18 months on the road, but they did it Peter's way. While they had a tour bus, they would stay overnight in hotels, with Steele bringing his own gym equipment so he could stay in shape on the road. The extensive touring and attention from MTV and some rock stations led to Bloody Kisses becoming Roadrunner Records' first gold album. By the new millennium, it went platinum, moving over 1 million copies. With Bloody Kisses, the band started to attract more females to their shows, and it would also influence their songwriting going forward. Guitarist Kenny Hickey would tell John Wiederhorn in the book Louder Than Hell, Peter saw how many women he was getting after Bloody Kisses and the song Block Number 1, so he decided to design the band towards getting more chicks. Steele's vulnerability later on in the band's career allowed some truly dark demons to come into his life, especially by the late 90s. It would ultimately lead to his passing in 2010. That concludes today's video, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in Rock and Roll True Stories. Take care.